everyone. I'm here looking at some dyno charts in Microsoft Paint because I have a good, interesting point that I want to share, and also I have a question that I haven't really gotten a good answer to. I'm seeing if anybody else would be interested in this, and I'm going to run through a short thought experiment with the difference just based off of 271's dyno chart on upgrading to a W1 turbo. And this is true for other turbos as well, like RB6 and something. Basically, any turbo that has a similar spool characteristics, which a lot of turbos do. But the problem that I'm seeing is that you're basically trading spool for the same area under the curve of torque. And so let's run through a thought experiment of two cars racing. And so they start at the same speed. Let's say they're in like second gear or something around 60 miles per hour. That's 40, 4,300, somewhere in there. So when the turbos spool, obviously the W1 will spool slightly faster. But let's just hypothetically here, both turbos are already spooled. They're both brake boosting, and they floor it. What happens? The W1 beats the stock turbo. It just has more torque everywhere over the course of the RPM band. And then once you get to the end, you have to shift. So let's say they were second, drops to third. That starts about there. What is it, like 80 something miles per hour or whatever. Third gear, boom. Then it goes back again. Shift to fourth, drops to there. And then fifth, and sixth, and so on and so forth. If you have infinite gears, Anyway, but yeah, that's basically the 271 is better if you don't account for the amount of spool that it needs. Let's say you have to. All right, you're both cruising in like fourth gear or something, and you floor it from a low speed, and you let the turbos spool up naturally. What happens, right? What happens is you have this massive sudden increase in torque from the stock turbo, and it pulls ahead of the 271 turbo. How much does it pull ahead by? That's anyone's guess. But then the 271 turbo catches up with the same torque value, by the way. All right, so basically what happens is speed-wise, y'all are identical until the stock car, or the stock turbo car, suddenly pulls ahead because of it has a higher acceleration. Then the 271 car pulls ahead because it gets slightly higher acceleration. And it'll just pull harder, and then you get the shifting game, and hopefully the W1 turbo will beat out the stock turbo. Now, what does this come down to if you include the spool characteristics? Let's say from like fourth gear or whatever, you're going from just under idle, so that's really freaking slow, and you floor it. What happens? So what we need is an area under the curve. That's what we need to solve this. Let's draw that. Let's draw the curves. This will tell us by how much, because what is acceleration? Acceleration is force times area. F equals ma. Force equals mass times acceleration. What is acceleration? Acceleration is the instantaneous torque at your wheels at any given speed. F equals ma. Simple as that. Mass of the car and the driver and whatever, all rotating masses, and then divide by the force, you get acceleration. Force divided by mass, you get acceleration. So, to find out which one accelerates faster, what do we have to do? We have to shift back this torque curve to get a better understanding of what's happening. Isn't that interesting? And let's make them even more even, so let's just erase this little section. Nobody's going to be really racing at these really low RPMs, but let's assume they do. Why not? What does this graph tell us? Well, it tells us that there's a little bit of area here, and a little bit of area here, but they're very similar for one. They're incredibly similar, actually. And this is a little bit of the kind of issue that's what I mean by it. It's kind of an issue, it's kind of a question. How much area under the curve is there for torque, which is your force? So this will tell you how much acceleration there is. And the answer is, they're about the same. They are incredibly similar, which you might be saying, well, why are W1 cars faster? Well, it's because it's higher in the RPM band, so when you're shifting and if you don't include turbo spool, it's going to be faster because it can have a higher torque at a higher speed. The way gears and you shift gears through. So the W1 turbo is a sufficient upgrade, but it has a very, very similar area under the curve, and that's kind of a problem. I want a turbo that has greater area under the curve, significantly greater, in fact. Right now, just a little bit here, just a little bit there, subtract this area here. It's kind of not, and that's a little bit sad. So what could we do to better counteract this? Well, we could increase the RPM, the red line. So let's draw a dotted line here. And the reason I'm doing down here is because if we imagine the horsepower dropping off afterwards, because it does. Other graphs have shown that most cars make peak horsepower around 66,000 RPM with the W1, so it'll drop off. So we need to match that with this. And now we have a significantly greater area under the curve here, but it's still not really that great. The area under the curve just isn't great, and for autocross or other racing events where you need a lot of low-speed cornering, it's just not as good as it could be, right? And so what I'm hoping is 271 came out with 271 came out with their ball bearing turbo, right? And ball bearing turbos, they generally have a lower inertial mass, so and they have lower friction, so they might spool faster. And so with that, let's use red here, and let's give it an extra 200 or so RPM. Right. Yeah, that looks something like that. I don't have a graph. If 271 would like to reach out and tell me, this is not. I'm not harping on their turbo or anything because I love their turbos. I love all the shit they make. It's beautiful. But if I line these up, this is significant. All right. So I matched the Swan curve essentially, but I just added just an extra 200 RPM. What does that do? It shifts to that so that we almost never have a moment just by adding a few RPM to the spool range. It makes it so that it's never has a moment that they overlap and that decreases, and it adds a significant amount of area under the curve. Significant. This is significant. How much is it compared to regular turbo? It's not that big of a deal, but it because the drop off, the efficiency drop off at high RPM is very dramatic on these small engines. Because of that, it allows you to basically generate a significantly higher area under the curve, which is good, which is what we want. And that's what I'm hoping is true for the ball bearing version before I buy one. And what I'm hoping is true for like the GC turbo or any turbo is just have a larger area under the curve than the OEM turbo, because the OEM turbo it isn't there, right? And these areas almost just counter each other. So at real low speed, if we were to do that simulation again, at really low speed, that spool is significantly shorter, right? That does make a difference. Instead of it being about 37, drop it down to about 35, 34 maybe. And so that would make a significant difference. It's just obvious. You get it's the exact same performance. It's just more area. It's all this section. That's just more area. And I want that. I'm sure everybody wants that extra torque. And what does that translate to horsepower? Well, instead of this, so if we take these two curves, right? Obviously, there's more area here than there is here. But if we were to imagine that this line continues. There. Okay. So, what happens if we extend the RPM out by about 200? That's what happens. So this area is significantly smaller. That cuts that negative area almost in half. You can kind of see that here. Same stuff. It almost cuts it in half. And that just basically means that you're adding more area under the curve. You're adding more performance. It's just a better system. And so I wanted to ask the question of, hey guys, there are instances where the stock turbo just outperforms 271's turbo, or actually almost every upgraded turbo. I would argue that they outperform almost every upgraded turbo because almost even their W2, W3, they're all derivatives of this, right? They make about 300 torque and then they flatten out. So they're all, and you can make this do whatever you want. You can keep moving this back, but the end area under the curve. You can't increase the red line to infinity, right? You can't go, what is that, 14,000 RPM? No, you can't do that. So at the end of the day, how much can you increase the red line? Dramatically increases the performance of the car if you can maintain, if you don't have a dramatic decrease in torque. Increasing the red line and keeping a solid torque curve is kind of important. The maximum speed, if I were just to cut this off here, all right, which that's basically what the curve will be if you hit red line, it just drops. This area right here, if I'm going to move that, you have significantly more area, all this, relative to a W1 without increasing the red line. Of course, most tuners do increase the red line with it, but if they don't, you just have less area under the curve. And so this is exactly what I meant by, theoretically, this isn't a perfect comparison. There are caveats, of course. I'm simplifying a lot of things. But I want to know if there are any turbos out there. And shout out to 271 for having the balls to literally do a back-to-back of their turbo and say, look how much better we are than the stock turbo, which, by the way, it's a significant upgrade. I would definitely recommend, even a journal bearing for the price. Currently, 271 has dropped the price of their journal bearing turbo since their initial launch. And even within like inflation and everything, like it's shout out for 271 for doing that. It's great. Thank you for allowing me to do this comparison, for having these images on the website for me to shit on. But I don't really mean it. But it's a good point. This is actually a comparison of what actual numbers we're getting. So it's interesting, and I would like to hear feedback on if I'm right, wrong, stupid, whatever. Tell me what you think, because at the moment, I think this is an interesting point. I'd like to hear what y'all think about it.